Maria had always been a quiet presence at the government facility where she worked. She arrived every morning before most of her colleagues, carrying her cleaning supplies with careful precision. Her uniform was always neat, her gloves spotless, and her broom and mop moved with the kind of skill that only comes from years of doing the same routine every day. To anyone looking at her from the outside, she seemed like just another janitor, someone whose job was to sweep floors, empty trash bins, and make the offices shine. But beneath that calm, humble exterior, Maria carried a secret, one that nobody could have guessed. Everywhere she went, she noticed how people judged her without thinking. Some of her colleagues would whisper to each other, joking about how ordinary she was, making sarcastic comments like, "Look, here comes the janitor again, saving the day with a mop." These jokes were meant to be harmless, or at least that's what they told themselves. But Maria could hear everything. She had learned long ago that people often underestimate others, assuming they are weak or unimportant simply because of their appearance or job title. She didn't let their words bother her. Instead, she smiled politely, focused on her work, and let her actions speak in silence. Her life outside the facility was just as quiet. Maria lived alone in a small apartment, preferring to keep her past private. To most people, she appeared like any ordinary person. A woman who worked hard, paid her bills, and never drew attention to herself. But the truth was far more complex. Maria had a background that could shock anyone if they knew the details. Before becoming a janitor, she had undergone rigorous training in a highly specialized military program. She had been part of operations so secretive that very few people even knew they existed. Her skills ranged from advanced combat to decoding intricate codes and handling weapons with precision. But all of this was hidden from the world. She had chosen a life of simplicity, not because she lacked talent, but because she wanted a quiet, ordinary life after years of extraordinary challenges. At the facility, she noticed small things that others overlooked. A stain on the floor, a dusty shelf, a misplaced file. She saw it all. But she also noticed human behaviors. She observed her colleagues, how they moved, how they reacted under stress, and how easily they assumed things about people around them. This skill of observation had been drilled into her during her previous life, but here it served a different purpose. It allowed her to avoid confrontation, anticipate issues, and maintain control in subtle ways. Despite her routine and quiet life, Maria occasionally felt the weight of the judgments around her. There were days when she wondered if people would ever see past her uniform and realize that the woman they mocked as just a janitor had lived a life filled with bravery, intelligence, and extraordinary experiences. But she reminded herself that she didn't need recognition. She had learned the value of humility and patience. True strength, she knew, didn't need an audience. Her colleagues, on the other hand, continued their playful mockery. Some left notes on her mop bucket jokingly saying things like, "Maybe you'll sweep away our secrets one day." Others would smirk as she passed, convinced that she was completely ordinary and unremarkable. They didn't know that she had been trained to notice every detail, remember every face, and understand situations far beyond their comprehension. Every laugh, every joke, every dismissive glance was a small test she passed with calm indifference. What made Maria fascinating wasn't just her hidden past. It was her ability to blend into the background while still holding the power of extraordinary skill. She could move through the facility unnoticed, yet if a crisis arose, she would be ready, prepared, and capable of handling it in ways that no one could imagine. Her life was a paradox. A person who appeared ordinary but carried the knowledge and experience of someone far beyond the ordinary. Most people never pause to think about the hidden lives around them. They don't consider that the person cleaning the floor or making coffee might have survived situations, trained under extreme pressure, or possessed talents that could astonish even the most experienced professionals. Maria embodied this reality perfectly. Her presence was quiet, unassuming, almost invisible, but it was a carefully maintained veil that hid a remarkable life. And so, Maria went about her work each day with quiet dignity, knowing that one day, circumstances might reveal the truth about her abilities. Until then, she continued to sweep floors, wipe counters, and polish surfaces, all while carrying the secrets of her past like invisible armor. She was underestimated by everyone around her, laughed at behind her back, and dismissed as just a janitor. But she didn't mind. She knew something they didn't. The world is full of surprises, and the most ordinary-looking people often hide the most extraordinary stories. Maria had grown used to the whispers and snickers that followed her everywhere at the facility. Her colleagues, many of whom were young, ambitious, and eager to prove themselves, often treated her like she didn't belong. They called her just a janitor in joking tones, laughing as if her work was insignificant and her presence irrelevant. Some would leave sarcastic comments while she worked, saying things like, "Careful, don't mop over any top-secret files today," or "Watch out, everyone, the janitor is on patrol." To anyone else, these jokes might have seemed harmless or even friendly, but Maria knew there was a subtle cruelty in them. People were mocking what they didn't understand and assuming that appearances told the whole story. The mockery didn't just happen occasionally. It was constant. At the coffee station, they whispered about her quietly, thinking she couldn't hear. In the hallways, they would exchange glances and chuckle at the thought of someone like Maria working in a place that demanded intelligence and skill. During breaks, they made jokes that painted her as simple, ordinary, and incapable of handling anything important. It would have been easy to feel hurt, but Maria had long since mastered the art of invisibility. She learned to listen without reacting, to let the words roll off her like water off a duck's back. Maria's silence was not weakness. In fact, it was her strength. She understood that people who mocked her had no idea of the life she had lived before stepping into the role of a janitor. They didn't know she had trained in environments far more intense than this facility could ever be. They had no idea she had faced situations where lives depended on her decisions, where one small mistake could have been fatal. Her past had taught her patience, discipline, and the ability to remain calm in the face of ridicule. She knew that reacting to their mockery would only give them a sense of control over her, and she refused to hand it to them. Despite her calm exterior, Maria often watched her colleagues closely. She noticed the way they laughed, the way their eyes darted around when they thought no one was looking, and the subtle tension that sometimes appeared when they were forced to take responsibility for a task. She noticed the overconfidence in those who thought themselves superior, and she quietly stored every detail in her mind. Every joke, every sneer, every dismissive glance became a piece of the puzzle, helping her understand the people around her. Her observation skills were unmatched, and although her colleagues didn't realize it, Maria had already learned more about them in 1 week than they could imagine. Her colleagues' ignorance was amusing to her at times. They mocked her for what they thought were her limitations, yet they had no idea that she had skills and experience far beyond theirs. She could anticipate problems, read situations, and act decisively if needed. What they considered ordinary was extraordinary. What they considered a joke could have been a life-saving insight if circumstances demanded it. Maria's mind, trained through years of demanding experiences, worked silently in the background, always analyzing, always calculating. Still, there were moments when Maria felt the sting of isolation. Even though she was respected for her work ethic, the social mockery sometimes created a subtle distance. She would see groups of employees laughing together, sharing inside jokes, and she knew she was often the subject rather than the participant. But instead of feeling bitterness, Maria turned it into motivation. She reminded herself that true strength isn't measured by acceptance from the crowd. It's measured by inner discipline, courage, and the ability to remain composed when others underestimate you. One day, during a particularly busy shift, a group of younger employees began teasing her more aggressively than usual. They joked about her uniform, her cleaning tools, and even her past. Some whispered things they assumed she couldn't hear, like, "She probably doesn't even know what's going on here," and "I wonder if she even notices the code names on those files." Maria paused for a moment, smiled politely, and continued her work as if nothing had happened. But inside, a small spark of anticipation lit up. She knew that one day, the world would see the truth, and the mockery would stop. Not because of confrontation, but because her hidden abilities would speak for themselves. What made the situation fascinating was the irony of it all. People laughed at her ignorance, not knowing that she had once been part of missions and operations that were so secretive and dangerous that they could hardly be imagined. They thought she was ordinary, when in reality, she was extraordinary in every sense. She had the skills, the knowledge, and the courage that they could only dream of. Yet she chose to stay in the background, working quietly and observing, waiting for the right moment to reveal what she was truly capable of. The mockery, in a way, became a kind of training ground for Maria. Every insult reinforced her patience. Every joke tested her composure. Every dismissive glance reminded her of the power of appearances and the foolishness of underestimating someone. She became not just a janitor, but a master of silent resilience, blending into the environment while quietly holding the upper hand in understanding, knowledge, and capability. Maria's story at the facility was just beginning. While her colleagues continued to mock her, they were unknowingly preparing for a moment they could never have imagined. One where the quiet, underestimated janitor would reveal skills and knowledge that would leave them speechless. The foundation of respect was being laid, not through confrontation, but through observation, patience, and an extraordinary ability to remain calm under ridicule. Maria's day started like any other. She moved quietly through the facility, mopping floors, emptying trash bins, and making sure every corner was spotless. Her colleagues continued with their usual banter, occasionally sneering at her or whispering jokes about her ordinary life. Maria didn't react, as always. She had long ago learned that the most powerful thing in situations like these was patience and observation. Today, however, something unusual caught her eye. Something that would change the way everyone saw her forever. As she passed the storage room where specialized equipment was kept, Maria noticed a rifle leaning against a shelf. It wasn't supposed to be there. Normally, weapons and sensitive gear were stored securely, checked in and out meticulously, and handled only by authorized personnel. Yet here it was, slightly out of place, as if someone had left it unattended. Most people would have walked past it, assuming it was just another piece of equipment. But Maria's instincts told her otherwise. She had worked with weapons in her past life, in ways that most people could never imagine, and she immediately recognized that this rifle was significant. Her curiosity grew as she approached it. The rifle looked ordinary to the untrained eye, but Maria knew that even ordinary-looking weapons could hide critical information. Her trained eyes scanned it carefully, noting the details of the make, model, and attachments. Then her gaze fell on something that made her heart skip a beat. A series of small, etched codes on the side of the rifle. These weren't decorative markings or serial numbers, they were tactical codes, meant for someone with specialized knowledge. They indicated settings, calibrations, and even instructions that could be used for a very specific type of mission. To anyone else, they would have meant nothing. But to Maria, they spoke volumes. She crouched slightly, running her fingers along the metal, tracing the lines of the code. Memories from her past flooded back. The long hours of training, the missions she had undertaken, and the skill it had taken to decipher similar codes under pressure. It was a skill few people possessed, and it was dangerous knowledge if it fell into the wrong hands. Maria realized immediately that someone had mishandled the rifle or overlooked its significance, and that this small oversight could lead to serious consequences. As she examined the weapon, a few of her colleagues wandered into the storage room, curious about what had caught her attention. Maria didn't say much at first, only giving subtle nods and glances as if she were inspecting the rifle for maintenance. But her calm confidence and precise movements began to pique their curiosity. "What are you doing?" one of them asked, half joking. Maria smiled faintly, replying, "Just checking that it's in order. Looks like someone left it out of place." They laughed, thinking she was exaggerating the importance of the rifle, assuming she had no real knowledge of what it was. But as Maria continued her inspection, she began quietly explaining the markings on the rifle. She pointed out the code etched near the barrel, noting that it indicated a very specific operational use. She described how the adjustments on the rifle matched a certain type of mission scenario, something only someone with actual tactical experience would understand. Her colleagues listened in silence at first, not realizing the depth of her knowledge. The more she spoke, the more their amusement faded into curiosity, and then into unease. It was a subtle but powerful moment. Maria didn't need to shout or demand respect. She simply let her skills do the talking. The rifle, a symbol of authority and precision, had become her instrument of revelation. Her colleagues had mocked her every day, thinking she was just a quiet janitor. Yet now, standing over this piece of equipment, Maria was revealing a hidden side of herself. One that was intelligent, skilled, and capable of handling situations far beyond their understanding. Her observations didn't stop there. Maria explained how the rifle's condition could indicate who had handled it, when it had been last used, and even hinted at the possible security implications of its misuse. Each detail she shared was precise, factual, and calm, but it carried the weight of experience that her colleagues couldn't match. They started to look at her differently, realizing that the woman they had dismissed was far from ordinary. There was a depth of expertise and competence they hadn't anticipated. What made the situation even more intriguing was Maria's demeanor. She remained humble, focused, and composed, never flaunting her knowledge. Her calm presence contrasted sharply with the anxiety that was beginning to creep into the faces of her colleagues. The power of her revelation wasn't in what she said loudly. It was in what she demonstrated silently. A lifetime of training and experience hidden beneath the surface of an ordinary appearance. By the time she finished inspecting the rifle, her colleagues were no longer laughing. The air was thick with surprise and respect, even if unspoken. Maria had turned a routine day into a moment of revelation. She had shown that appearances are often deceptive, that quiet people can carry extraordinary skills, and that patience and observation can reveal truths that mockery can never anticipate. In that moment, Maria realized something too. This was just the beginning. She had been underestimated for so long, and now, a small piece of her hidden life had started to surface. The rifle had not only caught her attention, it had set the stage for a shift in how everyone would see her from that day forward. And Maria, ever calm and observant, knew exactly how powerful that shift could be. As Maria carefully examined the rifle, she noticed more details that confirmed what she had suspected. The code etched onto the weapon wasn't random. It was a precise operational marking, something only someone trained in high-level missions would recognize. Her fingers traced the lines of the code, and instantly, her mind went back to the years of training, the long hours spent memorizing such markings, and the missions she had once undertaken. She realized that this rifle was more than just a weapon. It was a key to understanding a mission that was either ongoing or about to begin. Her colleagues, who had initially wandered in out of curiosity, began to pay closer attention. Some of them had started by teasing her about playing spy or pretending to know something, but now their expressions had changed. There was a mixture of curiosity and unease as they watched Maria handle the rifle with confidence and precision. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't make a scene, yet the atmosphere in the room had shifted. What they had once laughed at was suddenly serious. Maria pointed to specific parts of the rifle, explaining in calm, simple terms what the codes meant. "These markings indicate a calibration for long-range accuracy," she said, her tone steady and deliberate. "It also shows that this weapon is part of a set used for specialized operations, not just routine drills." Her colleagues exchanged nervous glances. None of them had the faintest idea what she was talking about, and they slowly realized that the ordinary janitor in front of them had knowledge that surpassed their own understanding of the facility and its equipment. A few of the security officers who were nearby were called in after someone mentioned her comments. They had initially expected Maria to be exaggerating or guessing, but when she repeated her observations and described the implications of the code, even they were impressed. The way she explained things, without panic or showiness, made it clear that she was speaking from experience, not speculation. Every word carried authority, the kind that comes from having been in situations where mistakes could have deadly consequences. Maria's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the growing tension in the room. Some of the colleagues who had mocked her earlier now felt a mix of embarrassment and amazement. They had laughed at her every day, imagining she was naive or simple-minded. And yet here she was, identifying something crucial that none of them had noticed. The realization slowly sank in. Maria was not who they thought she was. She was someone with skills, knowledge, an experience far beyond what they had imagined. The more Maria examined the rifle, the more she could tell about its recent use. She noted slight wear marks, the alignment of certain components, and the subtle indications left by whoever had handled it last. To an ordinary person, these details would be meaningless, but to her trained eyes they told a story of careful handling, of precise operations, and possibly of a mission that could impact the facility's security. She didn't need to explain all of it, but her calm authority conveyed that she understood something critical. One of the officers asked quietly, "How do you know all this?" Maria smiled faintly. She didn't go into her full history. That would have been too much, too soon. Instead, she simply said, "I've handled weapons like this before. It's part of my background." The answer was simple, but it carried weight. No one in the room dared to question her further. The tone had shifted from teasing to respect, from mockery to cautious attention. Maria's words and actions had done what her silence never could. They had made people recognize that she was extraordinary, even if they didn't know the full story yet. At the same time, Maria realized that this was a delicate moment. Revealing too much could draw unwanted attention, but staying silent could risk the mission. She carefully balanced what she disclosed, giving just enough insight to make others understand the significance of the rifle without exposing any classified information. This measured approach reflected her discipline and intelligence, qualities that had once been honed under life-or-death circumstances. Her colleagues watched, some leaning closer, others holding their breath, as she continued to demonstrate her understanding. Every action she took, every observation she made, reinforced the truth that she was not the person they had thought her to be. The janitor who had been mocked daily was revealing herself as someone whose expertise could not be ignored. It was a quiet revelation, but a powerful one, leaving everyone in the room silently reassessing their assumptions. By the end of the inspection, the room was filled with a mixture of awe and respect. Maria carefully returned the rifle to its proper place, ensuring everything was in order. She didn't seek recognition, she didn't demand applause. Her satisfaction came from knowing that the truth had been revealed. The moment had passed, but its impact lingered. Colleagues who had mocked her earlier now saw her in a completely new light. They had underestimated her, assumed she was ordinary, and in doing so, they had been reminded that appearances can be deceiving. Maria walked away quietly, as she always did, leaving the rifle in perfect order. But the room remained silent, charged with the realization that the woman they had teased and dismissed had a past they could barely imagine, and skills that could surpass anyone in that facility. It was a turning point, not just in how they saw Maria, but in how they understood the truth about the hidden lives of people around them. From that day on, Maria's colleagues knew that beneath her quiet demeanor and humble job title lay a lifetime of extraordinary experience. The janitor they had laughed at was, in fact, a trained professional whose expertise could change the outcome of critical situations. And Maria, as always, carried herself with the same calm dignity, knowing that the moment had come when patience, silence, and skill had finally spoken for themselves. After Maria had carefully examined the rifle and subtly revealed her expertise, the atmosphere in the storage room shifted completely. Her colleagues, who had spent so long mocking her as just a janitor, were now silent, uncertain of how to respond. They had walked in expecting to see the same quiet woman who always worked in the background. But what they witnessed instead was someone whose knowledge and skill far exceeded their expectations. The tension was almost tangible, a quiet buzz of realization that the woman they had underestimated was, in fact, extraordinary. The security officers who had been called in initially looked skeptical. They had been trained to recognize threats, to assess skills, and to identify competence in high-pressure situations. But as Maria calmly and precisely explained the significance of the rifle's code and the subtle signs of its recent use, even they had to pause. Her observations weren't guesses, they were accurate, detailed, and insightful. She pointed out the wear on specific parts of the rifle, explaining how it indicated careful handling, the probable experience of the last user, and the tactical implications of the weapon's configuration. Each statement was measured, clear, and delivered without the slightest hint of arrogance, yet it carried undeniable authority. Her colleagues began to feel the weight of their earlier assumptions. The jokes, the whispers, and the ridicule that they had so casually thrown at her now felt foolish. Some of them exchanged glances, embarrassed, realizing they had judged someone based on appearances alone. Maria had shown that competence, intelligence, and bravery could exist in the most unexpected places. She didn't need to announce her past. Her calm expertise was enough to speak for itself. The tension grew as the realization settled in. Those who had been so confident in their superiority now felt unsure of themselves. They began asking questions, hesitant and careful, trying not to appear ignorant. "How do you know all this?" one of them asked, almost in disbelief. Maria didn't give a long answer. She simply replied, "I've handled weapons like this before. It's part of my background." That simple explanation, delivered with quiet confidence, was enough to silence further doubts. Her words implied a history and a level of training far beyond what anyone in the room could imagine. Despite the respect she was beginning to earn, Maria remained humble. She didn't flaunt her knowledge, didn't demand recognition, and didn't allow the situation to turn into a spectacle. She understood the importance of discretion. This was sensitive equipment, and the implications of mishandling it were serious. By staying calm and measured, she demonstrated not only her knowledge but also her judgment and professionalism. Every move she made reinforced the fact that she was someone capable of handling high-stakes situations calmly, without drama or attention-seeking. Her quiet authority created a strange dynamic in the room. The same people who had mocked her daily now observed her with cautious attention, unsure whether to ask more questions or simply step back. Maria had flipped the script entirely. The ridicule had vanished, replaced by respect mixed with curiosity and even a hint of awe. People who had once assumed she was ordinary were now quietly assessing her, trying to understand how someone so seemingly unremarkable could possess such extraordinary skills. As the inspection continued, Maria noticed the change in their behavior. They were careful not to interrupt, speaking more quietly, and listening more intently. Even small actions, like a slight nod or a thoughtful glance, indicated that the mockery had been replaced by a growing recognition of her abilities. It was as though her calm confidence had shifted the entire dynamic, creating a new reality where she was no longer just a janitor, but someone whose expertise commanded attention. This shift wasn't limited to her immediate colleagues. News of her knowledge and the way she had handled the situation began to spread subtly throughout the facility. People who had previously dismissed her began to see her differently. The quiet, diligent woman who swept floors and emptied trash bins was no longer invisible. She had demonstrated, without words of self-promotion, that appearances could be deceiving and that anyone, no matter their position, could possess skills and experience worthy of respect. Maria herself felt a quiet satisfaction. She didn't need praise or recognition. The respect she had earned silently was enough. For years, she had observed, waited, and endured the mockery without complaint. Now, in this simple yet profound moment, her patience and skill had done the talking. The power of what she had revealed was not just in the information she shared about the rifle, but in the way she had demonstrated composure, intelligence, and authority. By the end of the day, the room had changed entirely. The laughter and mockery had vanished. Her colleagues were no longer making jokes or exchanging sarcastic comments. Instead, they treated her with careful attention, recognizing, even if subconsciously, that she was someone exceptional. Maria returned the rifle to its proper place, ensuring everything was in order, and walked away with the same quiet dignity she always carried. The incident had left a lasting impression, a reminder that strength, intelligence, and experience often exist where no one expects it. The day marked a turning point. Maria's colleagues would never look at her in the same way again. The mockery had ended, replaced by a deep, unspoken respect. They had learned an important lesson. Assumptions based on appearances are often wrong, and those who seem quiet or ordinary may hold extraordinary abilities. Maria's patience, calm, and expertise had done what ridicule could not. It had changed perceptions forever. After the tense moment with the rifle, Maria's colleagues were beginning to understand that she was far from ordinary. The teasing and mockery that had followed her for months had vanished, replaced by a quiet, almost nervous curiosity. People started to watch her with a new perspective, noticing the calm confidence in her movements, the precision in her work, and the way she carried herself. But Maria wasn't finished yet. She knew that to truly prove her abilities, she had to go beyond just talking about the rifle. She needed to show her knowledge in a way that left no room for doubt. Her opportunity came unexpectedly. One of the officers asked a practical question about the rifle's setup, something that had caused confusion among the staff. It was a simple question on the surface, but the answer required specialized knowledge. Maria calmly stepped forward, her hands resting lightly on the weapon as she began to explain the adjustments in detail. She described the subtle calibrations, the specific purpose of each component, and how the markings corresponded to operational conditions. As she spoke, she moved deliberately and precisely, demonstrating a level of familiarity that made it clear she wasn't guessing. Her colleagues were silent, unable to interrupt, as she continued. Every explanation was supported by practical insight. She explained why certain parts of the rifle were worn more than others, what that indicated about the user's experience, and how the rifle could perform under extreme conditions. Her words painted a picture of someone who had worked in situations where precision and knowledge could mean the difference between success and failure. They were not abstract ideas. These were observations drawn from real-life experience, and they carried weight. Maria didn't stop there. She demonstrated the use of the rifle in a controlled, hypothetical scenario, showing exactly how it could be handled for maximum accuracy and efficiency. Every movement was deliberate, every adjustment precise, and every explanation clear. Her colleagues watched in awe as she revealed knowledge that none of them had suspected. The janitor they had dismissed as ordinary had suddenly become an authority figure, someone whose expertise could not be questioned. Even the security officers trained to evaluate skills under pressure were impressed. What made the moment even more powerful was Maria's calm demeanor. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't seek attention, and she didn't display arrogance. Her expertise spoke for itself, quietly but unmistakably. The contrast between her composed presence and the growing tension in the room made her demonstration even more compelling. People who had laughed at her now realized they had misjudged her entirely. The power of her abilities didn't come from showiness. It came from precision, knowledge, and confidence. As she continued to explain, the colleagues who had mocked her earlier began to exchange glances of disbelief and amazement. They had assumed she was ordinary, incapable of understanding or contributing anything significant. Now, they were witnessing firsthand a level of skill and insight that few could match. The mockery they had once used as a shield to feel superior had evaporated, leaving them in silent admiration. Maria's demonstration was not just about the rifle. It was about proving that appearances can be deceiving, and that true talent often hides in plain sight. Even the senior staff who had been watching quietly were impressed. They saw how Maria's knowledge and composure could make her an asset in situations they had never considered her involved in. Her ability to analyze, explain, and demonstrate the use of the rifle clearly indicated that she had a level of experience far beyond what her current role suggested. It was a revelation that forced everyone in the room to reconsider their assumptions and recognize the depth of her abilities. During this demonstration, Maria remained mindful of the importance of discretion. She provided enough detail to prove her expertise without revealing classified information or compromising security. This careful balance highlighted not only her technical skill but also her judgment and professionalism. It was one thing to know how to handle the weapon. It was another to know what to reveal, when to reveal it, and how to convey it responsibly. Maria's awareness of this balance further impressed her colleagues, showing that her abilities extended beyond technical knowledge to include wisdom and strategic thinking. By the time she finished, the atmosphere in the room had completely transformed. What had started as a casual inspection by a janitor had become a powerful demonstration of skill, knowledge, and calm authority. Her colleagues were no longer merely curious. They were respectfully aware that they had underestimated someone extraordinary. The silence that followed her demonstration was filled with recognition, understanding, and a sense of awe. Maria had not needed to argue or force respect. She had earned it quietly, methodically and decisively. As she returned the rifle to its proper place, Maria felt a quiet satisfaction. She didn't need praise or applause. The impact of her demonstration was evident in the changed expressions of everyone in the room. The person who had once been mocked, dismissed, and underestimated had now revealed a hidden depth that could not be ignored. The moment marked a turning point, not just in how her colleagues viewed her, but in how they would approach assumptions about anyone in the future. From that day on, Maria's presence in the facility carried a different weight. She continued her work with the same humility as before, sweeping floors and cleaning offices, but now she did so with the quiet knowledge that her skills had been recognized. The respect she had earned silently would follow her, changing the way her colleagues interacted with her and ensuring that she was no longer underestimated. Maria had proven, through patience, observation, and demonstration, that true ability cannot be judged by appearances alone. After Maria's calm and precise demonstration with the rifle, the room had shifted from tension to quiet amazement. Her colleagues who had mocked her for months were now watching her with a mix of awe and disbelief. The playful jokes and sarcastic comments that had once defined their interactions were gone, replaced by a respectful silence that spoke louder than any words. Maria had transformed in their eyes from just a janitor into someone whose expertise, composure, and intelligence could not be ignored. It wasn't just the security officers who were impressed. The regular staff, the ones who had spent weeks teasing her in hallways and break rooms, now felt a combination of embarrassment and newfound respect. They had assumed that her humble demeanor and quiet work habits meant she was ordinary, perhaps even naive. But in the space of a few minutes, Maria had revealed a depth of knowledge and skill that none of them had expected. Every movement, every explanation, every subtle insight she offered proved that they had been wrong to underestimate her. The realization began to sink in slowly. Her colleagues understood that Maria's calm confidence and attention to detail were not coincidental. They were the result of rigorous training, experience under pressure, and a lifetime of disciplined focus. She had taught herself patience, observation, and the ability to act decisively when circumstances demanded it. All of these traits had been hidden under the ordinary exterior of a janitor's uniform. They had laughed at her, mocked her, and assumed she had nothing to contribute. Yet she had silently surpassed all their expectations. Some of the staff tried to make small conversation afterward, hesitant but curious. "How did you know that?" one asked quietly, his voice carrying a note of genuine surprise. Maria responded with her usual humility, smiling faintly. "Experience teaches you to notice things others might miss." She didn't go into details about her past, nor did she feel the need to. Her demonstration had already spoken volumes. Words were unnecessary. Her expertise and calm authority had made the point. The shift in the room was subtle but profound. The mocking colleagues were no longer certain of themselves. They had spent so long teasing Maria, thinking it harmless, but now they were beginning to see the consequences of their assumptions. The woman they had dismissed had not only caught their attention but had earned their respect through quiet, undeniable competence. This wasn't respect based on fear or authority. It was earned because she had shown, without ego or theatrics, that she was capable, knowledgeable, and skilled in ways they could barely comprehend. Even senior staff members who had previously ignored her now observed her with interest. They realized that Maria's knowledge and precision could make a real difference in situations that required focus, composure, and expertise. Her ability to notice small details, analyze them accurately, and act decisively was not something that could be taught overnight. It was clear she had lived a life filled with challenges and experiences that had honed her abilities far beyond what her current role suggested. As the day went on, Maria's presence carried a new weight in the facility. Colleagues who had once laughed at her started treating her with subtle respect. They sought her advice on small technical matters, not just about equipment, but about practical problems that required calm judgment. The shift wasn't dramatic or loud. It was quiet, understated, and persistent. Maria had shown them that true ability and intelligence are often hidden, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. Despite the newfound respect, Maria remained humble and composed. She didn't flaunt her skills or demand acknowledgement. She continued performing her daily duties with the same diligence and attention to detail as always. This humility was part of what made her remarkable. She had proven her capabilities without arrogance, showing that quiet strength and competence are far more powerful than loud displays of talent. Her colleagues learned an important lesson. Judging someone by their appearance or role can be a costly mistake. Over time, the dynamics at the facility began to change. Maria's colleagues started to approach her differently. They listened more carefully when she spoke, valued her insights, and treated her with a level of consideration they had previously denied her. The social hierarchy that had allowed mockery and teasing to persist had been subtly reshaped by one quiet demonstration of skill and intelligence. Maria had not sought to dominate or belittle anyone. She had simply allowed her competence to speak for itself, and the transformation was undeniable. In the quiet moments of the day, Maria reflected on the shift around her. She felt a quiet satisfaction, not because she had silenced mockery, but because the truth about her abilities had finally been recognized. For years, she had endured ridicule, laughed at behind her back, and underestimated at every turn. Now, without confrontation or force, she had changed perceptions through skill, observation, and composure. It was a triumph, not in the sense of proving others wrong, but in demonstrating that quiet patience and excellence have their own power. By the end of the day, Maria had cemented her new position in the eyes of her colleagues, not through words or status, but through undeniable skill and calm authority. The janitor who had been mocked and dismissed was now respected, observed, and even quietly admired. She had taught her colleagues an invaluable lesson. True strength, expertise, and courage often lie where you least expect them, and the people who seem ordinary may hold extraordinary stories and abilities within. Maria returned to her routine with her usual grace, sweeping floors and cleaning offices, but now every movement carried the silent acknowledgement of her colleagues' respect. They no longer saw her as merely a janitor. They saw someone remarkable, someone capable, and someone whose hidden talents had finally come to light. The moment had changed the facility, the people in it, and the way Maria would be perceived from that day forward. After the events with the rifle and the demonstration of her expertise, Maria's life at the facility had changed in subtle but profound ways. The colleagues who had once mocked her, whispered behind her back, and treated her as just a janitor now regarded her with quiet respect. They no longer dismissed her presence. Instead, they watched her with curiosity and admiration, realizing that the woman who moved silently through the hallways had a life and skills far beyond their imagination. Maria herself noticed the change, though she didn't let it alter her humble routine. She continued to sweep floors, polish surfaces, and empty trash bins with the same care and attention as before, quietly carrying the respect she had earned. It wasn't just the colleagues she worked alongside who had changed. The atmosphere in the facility had shifted. People had begun to recognize that appearances can be deceiving, that someone who seems ordinary may hold extraordinary abilities. Maria's quiet demonstration with the rifle had done more than reveal her skills. It had challenged assumptions and biases that people carried unconsciously. They had learned an important lesson. Strength, intelligence, and competence do not always announce themselves with loud words or flashy actions. Sometimes, they exist quietly, waiting for the right moment to show themselves. Over the next few days, Maria noticed subtle changes in how she was treated. Colleagues approached her for advice on practical matters, small technical questions, and sometimes even guidance on procedural details. No one questioned her competence anymore. Instead, they sought her input, acknowledging her knowledge without needing to say it aloud. The teasing and mockery that had been a daily reality were gone. It was a complete reversal, not because Maria demanded it, but because she had earned it through her calm composure and undeniable skill. The respect she had gained extended beyond immediate colleagues. Even senior staff, who had been largely indifferent to her before, began to recognize her value. They observed her careful attention to detail, her ability to notice things others overlooked, and the quiet confidence with which she handled unexpected situations. Maria's insights into the rifle incident had been just a glimpse of her capabilities, and senior staff understood that her skills could be an asset in situations they might not have anticipated. Her humble position as a janitor no longer defined her. Her actions and abilities did. For Maria, the recognition was not a source of pride in the ordinary sense. She did not seek admiration or status. Instead, it was a quiet satisfaction, an acknowledgement that the truth of her abilities had finally been seen. For years, she had endured mockery and underestimation without complaint. She had learned to be patient, to observe, and to act when the time was right. This patience had paid off, and the moment of recognition was a quiet victory, a validation not of ego, but of perseverance, skill, and quiet dignity. As time passed, her story began to circulate quietly among staff. They spoke of the janitor who had noticed something important about the rifle, who had explained codes and calibrations with expertise, and who had demonstrated skills that went far beyond anyone's expectations. The story became almost legendary within the facility, a reminder that people should not be judged by appearances or job titles. Maria herself rarely participated in the retelling. She allowed the story to speak for her, knowing that the lessons it carried were more important than the attention it brought. This newfound respect also influenced how people approached their own assumptions. Colleagues became more careful, more thoughtful, and more respectful of those who seemed quiet or ordinary. They realized that the quiet ones, the observers, often carried the most knowledge and understanding. Maria's example had shifted the culture subtly but meaningfully. Her presence was a constant reminder that underestimation could lead to surprise, and that humility often conceals extraordinary strength. Maria continued her work, moving through the facility with the same calm, methodical routine she had always maintained. But now, every glance from a colleague carried acknowledgement. Every question was asked with respect, and every interaction reflected a new understanding of her abilities. She did not seek recognition for herself. The quiet acknowledgement she received was enough. The impact of her actions had gone beyond her personal experience. It had changed how people saw and valued skill, patience, and knowledge in others. Looking back, Maria understood the significance of the moment with the rifle. It had been more than just an inspection. It had been a turning point. It had revealed her abilities, changed perceptions, and reshaped the social dynamics of the facility. She had turned what had once been mockery into respect, demonstrating that courage, intelligence, and skill could shine quietly, without seeking attention. Her colleagues learned that the ordinary can hide the extraordinary, and that judgment based on appearances can often be wrong. In the quiet of her daily routine, Maria carried the lessons forward. She remained diligent, observant, and humble, knowing that true strength did not need to be shouted. The rifle incident had revealed her story, but her life continued with the same quiet dignity. The people around her now understood that Maria was someone remarkable, someone whose skills, experience, and patience had transformed the way they saw her, and perhaps the way they saw the world. Her legacy within the facility was secure. Maria, once mocked as just a janitor, had become a symbol of quiet competence, perseverance, and hidden strength. She had shown that extraordinary people often live ordinary lives and that patience, observation, and calm action can reveal greatness in the most unexpected places. From that day forward, she was no longer underestimated, no longer mocked, and forever respected for the remarkable person she truly was.